In the early 1930s, Hubert J. Taylor, an American, set out to save the Club Aluminum Products Distribution Company from bankruptcy. He believed himself to be the only person in the company with 250 employees who had hope. His recovery plan started with changing the ethical climate of the company. In early 1940s, Herbert Taylor became a Rotary International director, and he took the four-way test to a Rotary International meeting. And there, Rotary International adopted it, which we've had as Rotarians since the early 1940s. So if you would, follow your bulletins, and we will begin. Following the four-way test, Matthew Posey, an Interact student from Lincoln County High School, will lead us in the pledge. And Chad Mathey, one of our newest Rotarians, will lead us in prayer. So if you all will stand, we'll repeat the four-way test. Okay, is it the truth? Whoop. Let's back up. Our standard. Okay, is it the truth?
Our standard is Rotarians, not half-truths, but those things that embody the truth and believe it as we understand it.
Is it fair to all concerned?
Fairness goes beyond truth and reaches for the place where we put ourselves in the shoes and ask if we would like these ideas thought about us, these words spoken about us, and these actions done to us.
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Rotary wants us to consider our thoughts, words, and actions will be the building blocks that create a more workable world.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
If the idea, its expression, and its implementation will not lift up all the people within our reach, is it really worth sharing?
Now, face the flag, and Matthew will lead us in our pledge.
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing us all to be together today. What a great day to be a Rotarian. We appreciate Coach Majors and everyone being here. Just bless the food as we eat it. Allow it to nourish our bodies. And just watch over us as everyone travels back to their homes and back to their places of business as we conclude this meeting. In your name we pray. Amen.
I'm not sure I know the reason for the overflow crowd today, but it is nice to have Coach Majors with us, and he probably wrote his speech for today's program on the way down here, not knowing about 10 o'clock this morning what he was really going to talk about. But anyway, not to introduce our guests by name, but we will ask, if you will, all of those from Huntland, would you please stand? All right. Lynchburg, please stand. Good delegation from Lynchburg here today. Tullahoma, Shelbyville. Our guests from Fayetteville, please stand. And we have several guests here from Nashville. Would you stand? Okay, thank you very much. At this point in the program, I'm going to turn it over to Larry Taft. Larry is a new Rotarian of about a month, and he's also the retired sports editor of the Nashville Tennessean. And Larry, if you would come forward, we'll let you have the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Farrar. First of all, I'd like to say I appreciate the good turnout. We don't often have the opportunity to to have people who are considered, well, who are actually are legends in our midst. And Coach Major certainly fits into that category, and some of our guests are legendary in their own right, and we're proud to have all of you here today. One of the things that, as an old sports writer, you always hated to deal with somebody like a Coach Majors whenever things weren't going real well, because he knew pretty well how to slice and dice you and put you in your little cubby hole and whatever. So, and some of the people who are friends of his, they pretty well know that he's able to have a pretty cutting tongue, and he didn't take many prisoners whenever he was such a successful head coach. So with that thought in mind, we really aren't going to spend a lot of time listening to Coach Majors and youth football and that kind of thing today. He's got about 78 years of people that have been associated with him that would like just to have a little something to say about him and to him. And we're going to spend a lot of time with those people today as opposed to listening to Coach Majors. We know he knows football, but we're going to spend some time with some others. The first person I'd like to bring up to talk about Coach Majors, is a little bit of a roast here, is Bob Simmons. Mr. Simmons is from Kelso. He's a graduate of, back the old days, of Fayetteville Central, played at Vanderbilt, and wound up becoming a successful businessman in the steel business in Birmingham and then in Nashville after that. His association with Coach Majors goes a little bit farther than just about anyone. He was a competitor of Coach Majors at Kelso when Coach Majors was at Lynchburg, and that would date us back into the 1940s, which is, as we know, a few years. So right now I'd like to have Mr. Simmons to come up and just have any shot he wants at Coach Majors, say anything good or bad.
Thank y'all. I appreciate it, and I'm thankful that I have an opportunity to come down here and visit with y'all. So let's get her done. 1, 2, 3. Anchor down! Now, I'm doing this to make a point, okay? It takes the meanest SOB around to be a Vanderbilt fan. Now, everywhere you go, you're outnumbered. This whole room is full of UT people. I think on spot 3 Vanderbilt folks. So you got to be really tough. You've got to be really, really tough. In fact, even at our own homecoming game, we're outnumbered there. So, but anyway, John, it's good to see you, buddy.
You too,
You're looking mighty fine. Glad you're creeping out of your cave of insecurity and denial, introversion, and reticence. But by the way, that jersey you had on Saturday, a little tight around the girth. And the number, was that Paul Hornick? Oh, Lord. That's not even in my notes. That just slipped out. But I'll tell you one thing. You did look good. You had on your tennies, and you could balance yourself real well. And I was afraid you'd stumble and fall coming out of the tee, okay? Some of y'all may know, but just a few of you, but most of you do not know, that Johnny wanted to go to Vanderbilt. Some of you may know that his grandmother, on his dad's side, was a Sanders. And she was double first cousins with Red Sanders, at that time head coach at Vanderbilt. Now, Red, this was in the early 50s, and Red, along about that time, decided that he wanted to go to UCLA, and he started a dynasty out there with the single wing. Vanderbilt, being always on the cutting edge, mind you, in everything, decided that they would hire Bill Edwards to come in with a new wave formation that was taking the country then, the T formation. John's triple threat talents were no longer needed at Vanderbilt. So Coach Majors was crushed by this rejection. He had run rampant through the Duck River Conference. The Huntland team, they beat everybody that could stand up, and he was all everything in the Duck River Conference. One year he was Mr. Duck. Second year he was Mr. River, and his senior year he was Mr. Duck River. Now, the thing about this is he had no competition. Now, the only competition he had was Dr. Bill Wise, who played for the Petersburg Bulldogs. Now, back in those days, it was not unusual for people to buy players, maybe. I don't know. That's a little pushy, but lure them. And so Dr. Wise was lured from Petersburg and Turkey Warren to Fayetteville. Now, that caused a row. But anyway, that was something that was done in those times. Mr. Bobby Allen was Dr. Bill's mentor. Bobby Parks was lured from Lynchburg over here, and his mentor was Mr. Jess Hobbs. But anyway, John was greatly rejected for having not been able to go to Vanderbilt. But his mother wiped his little tears away and patted him on his little back and said, "Now, John, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do better than that. We're going to go to UT, to General Neyland and Bowden White, and we'll run their single wing, and we'll make it even better." So the Majors family could go to Knoxville and see most of the games and travel to most of the home wing away games, and so everything was great. Now, back in those days, do y'all remember the little plastic aluminum boxes that you put the strap around and you'd sit and wash clothes back and forth? Well, Ms. Majors did that for John, and she kept him in freshly starched and ironed shirts where he'd be real smart with the co-eds, okay? John's career at UT flourished. He did quite well. He was All-American. He was SEC Player of the Year. He was, you name it, he was just about it. Now, many think that he was motivated and pushed himself because of the Vanderbilt rejection, and I'm not sure that that's not true. Now, the plot thickens right here. It's November 1956, UT versus Vandy in Nashville. Larry Munson is a play-by-play man for Vanderbilt, and he's on 650 Clear Channel. I know we've all heard that. It's a cool, crisp, sunny day in Nashville and in Huntland. And everyone in Huntland is congregated at the John Hunter General Store around the old pot-bellied stove, and they were drinking bootleg beer from down in Alabama, and the betting was going crazy. But anyway, everybody was gathered around listening to the old Zenith wood cabinet radio. Back in Nashville, John is still evaluating and assessing the signs that hung all around the stadium. It said VU for culture, UT for agriculture. Now, John was a little upset with this, and he really didn't know how to take it because he'd had about all he wanted from Vanderbilt. So anyway, let me bring you up to speed here. UT is behind by 4 points. They're driving to the north end of the stadium, and that's the open end that's been there forever. Time is running out. It's in the fourth quarter. It's 4th and goal with a ball on the 20, 25, or 30. I don't remember. It had been such a testy ball game that all the chalk had fallen off everywhere. You couldn't see anything. And it's on the right hash mark. UT lines up in a single wing right into the short side of the field. Had a balanced line. The snap goes back, and as it does, Stockton Atkins. Do y'all remember Stockton? He 5'9", weighed 142. He was the Jacobs. He was recipient of the Jacobs blocking award 2 years in a row. Stockton heads for the defensive end and kicks him out. John takes off, plants his right foot, and cuts right up into the hole. After that, things begin to break down. There's nobody around but John in all these black jerseys. So he's on a perilous journey to the goal line. Juking, jiving, stiff arming, walking the chalk line, John crosses the TD line. Bedlam erupts because the stadium is full of Big Orange fans. But Majors continues running on out of the stadium as the clock hits 0. An eerie quiet engulfs the crowd. You could hear a pin drop. Finally, a talking hair with a microphone finds Coach Shirley Majors. Coach, what's going on? John has left the stadium just like Elvis. He's on West End, running down, trying to find 41A back to Huntland. He's quite depressed. And the little girl says, but why? He's gone back to Huntland to rediscover his roots.
Okay. Is the Reverend Don Schultz here? Okay. Now, when you think about ministers and coaches in the same world, that's not real common, especially football coaches. But Don Schultz and Coach Majors graduated together at Huntland in 1953. They spent 3 years playing football as teammates and only lost 1 game. But as Mr. Schultz points out, when the other Majors brothers came along a little bit later, Huntland was even better than they were then. They won more games, didn't lose at all. One other thing that whenever I spoke with Don recently, he's a Baptist minister down at Newmarket, lives in Park City, and he told me that almost every time that he and Coach Majors talk, that Coach Majors always said, Don, are you still praying for me? Now, you can take that any way you want.
I've waited a long time for this. I finally get to tell things and because of the mixture of the crowd, it sure has restricted what I had to say. I'm going to have to soften this up and clean this up just a little bit. My friend John is, it didn't just happen that he became a good football player. It was born and bred in him. More than that, he was always a fast thinker. I mean, he could come up with stuff. I remember one time in high school, we were standing in the hallway, and this young lady comes by, and you could tell that her blue jeans were fitting her real good. And she had her hair in one of those things with a rubber band around it hanging down like that, and she goes by, and John said, Dee Dee, cute little tail. And before we could look any farther, Miss Nell Maker, our English teacher, steps from behind the door, heard everything, and he quickly said, ponytail, ponytail. John and I double dated together a lot, and that stuff I just can't talk about. He asked me the last time that we talked and we got against the alumni banquet, he said, would you say that I was always a gentleman and acted right and did right, even though we were in the back seat and you and your girl in the front seat driving down the road and everything? But I said, yeah, I'd have to say that you acted right. And the girls always question me about what is really wrong with this guy. I mean, you know, and that's as far as I'll carry that. Some of the stories that are told and about coaches and we had a dear friend, some of you may know him, named Buford Keith. He was a friend of the Majors family. Supported the high school and all that stuff, and he stopped by the church one day. He and his wife, they stopped by, and he said, "Hey D, what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm just out here enjoying the weather a minute." And he said, Did you hear the story about John?" I said, "No." And this time he was coaching at UT and having a difficult time and everything, and he said, "Did you hear about his little boy had started school and come home from school?" And John asked him, said, "What did you learn in school today?" And his boy said, "About the three bears." And John said, "Lord goodness, surely there's not two more of them, you know." Ed DiCarlo, who I was acquainted with in the transportation business back many years ago, this was when that they hired John to come to Pittsburgh. And Ed DiCarlo, who was on a business in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, which is not far from where the university is there in Pittsburgh, and he calls me up. We were having a conversation about some stuff, and he said, "Who's this hillbilly that we've hired? Do you know anything about him from?" I said, "Yeah, he's a classmate of mine. Went to school with him 3 years and played ball with him for those 3 years in Huntland High School." And he said, "What do you know about him and all that?" I said, "Well, not a lot that I can really say that I know for sure about, you know." And but I said, "He don't know much in the sense of everyday stuff like you and I deal with, but outside of that, he's okay." And he said, well, what can I expect?" I said, "Give him 4 years, and he'll have you a national championship team." He said, "You got to be kidding." I said, "No, give him the time." Didn't take him that long. Didn't take that long till he, of course, having Tony Dorsett and a tackle or two that some of you know about and all that, I could have done the same thing. So could have you. But be that as it may, one of the things that John had a hard time with was getting dates all the time. I mean, you need to get me. Could you give me a date? I said, "I'll do my best," you know. And so I asked this young lady who was a classmate of ours, and she was a brunette, very pretty and everything. And I said, "Would you want to go out with me and John and my date?" And who was another girl there that we double dated with sometimes. And she said, "No, I can't go." I said, "Well, that's okay." I said, "Any reason why don't you want?" She said, "Well, to start with, you're just too short." And I thought, well, you've gone out with me, and he's taller than I am, and said, "Too short." And I couldn't understand that until, now you got to get this picture. The dressing room for the football players joined the classroom for the Industrial Arts building, which was made out of plank, which was full of knot holes. And it wasn't until I learned that she and 2 other girls had been peeping through the knot holes, watching the boys take showers. And that's where all that came from. And maybe this is going to get out of hand. I just better quit. But in all seriousness, John and I have been friends and ball players, and I owe a lot to him and his family, and love them dearly. And I've told this many times, and I say this in seriousness and all the love I have for him, more so for his dad. Coach Shirley Majors taught me more than stuff about basketball, whom I played against, the guy that just spoke here in favor of Bob Simmons and Jim Cunningham, these other people that we had competition, never in football but in basketball. But Coach Shirley Majors, his father, I owe a lot to. He taught me how to be a man. He taught me how to treat people. He taught me how to act. He taught me how to be a man. And I just thank the good Lord above for their part in life and still in my life. Being a minister is more than just preaching the Word of God. It's being a man. I learned a lot, not just from my dad, but from his dad as well. God bless you.
Meeting adjourned.
We're not near through yet, Coach. All right. Our next roaster, all you Rotarians don't need an introduction to. It's our own Dick Farrar, who I just want all of you people here to know that this program today is Mr. Farrar's brainchild, and he is the one that is responsible for it. He's been friends with Coach Majors for a long time. Actually, I guess that they were perhaps only two of the Tennesseans in the early 60s when Coach Majors was at Starkville, Mississippi, coaching as an assistant. Dick Farrar was down there as a football player, having played here at Fayetteville High School. So anyway, Mr. Farrar, you're next.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry. Don, you're going to be a hard act to follow, but you did set the stage for the one story that I have about the coach. Many of you remember back in the 70s, there was a lady by the name of Phyllis George that was Miss Texas, 1970, Miss America, 1971, First Lady of Kentucky from 79 to 83 as a result of marrying a fellow by the name of John Y. Brown. Well, Phyllis was the first female sideline reporter that the networks had begun to think about and begun to use, and forerunner of the female sideline reporters today. Well, Pitt was on their run to the national championship in New Orleans against Georgia, and they had to get by Notre Dame, which was the 9th game of the year, and then Penn State, the 10th game. Well, Pitt managed to beat Notre Dame convincingly, and Phyllis wanted to know more about that, so she stood outside the dressing room. Marissa, where's Marissa? Would you come up, help me with this? Slide it back. Here, stand on that basket.
Oh, goodness gracious.
So, Coach Majors comes out of the dressing room, and a couple of the network men get him over to Phyllis, and Phyllis pulls him over and says,
Coach Majors, your Pitt team just defeated Notre Dame today very convincingly. Next up is number 5 Penn State. Do you think your team can beat both two nationally ranked championship teams?
repeat your question.
Is there a chance your Panthers can beat Penn State next week after such a huge victory today?
No, Miss George, the weather didn't have anything to do with it.
Our next roaster is someone who has a Franklin County background, has known Coach Majors since their days of high school together when they competed in basketball, and their fathers were coaches, although Coach Majors and Coach Cunningham didn't play against each other. Jim Cunningham played at Vanderbilt. He was the captain of the 1955 Gator Bowl team, and he fondly remembers the 1954 game. I guess it is, that Vanderbilt played against Tennessee. I think that had the black and gold winning by a score of 26-0. He doesn't like remember the 55 game near as well, because that game was a 20-14 UT win. And I think Coach Majors, who was the SEC Player of the Year that year, had a lot to do with that. But Mr. Cunningham has been friends with the Majors family. He after his time as Vanderbilt freshman coach, he coached with Coach Shirley Majors at Swanee back in 1962, and has just been friends with the family and a confidant for years and years. Mr. Cunningham.
Y'all put a fella in a tough situation. John and I have been friends for many, many years. He detailed the friendship of our parents and our fathers, who were both coaches. And we surely need to remind everybody here that John's daddy was probably one of the more successful high school and college coaches in the nation. And a great, great individual, and a person I was pleased to work with one year after I left Vanderbilt. And I had 4 years at Vandy playing, and then 5 years of coaching there. And that was the time John was launching his career too. But before those times, when we were growing up, we'd get together lots of times and talk about what we were going to do in life. And we always had the prospects of being coaches that to fall back on, but John was a very, very serious person. And so frankly, he and Don Schultz, and there was another preacher boy down there at the Huntland group called Durwood McCord. And any of you folks from the Nashville area might know that Durwood was very high up in the Methodist hierarchy. And so Durwood and D.D. and John, frankly, they all got together, and what you don't really realize is that John's, one of his great uncles was a super preacher, almost evangelist. And so he's got preaching in his blood. And so, but they didn't have a singer. No Cliff Barrers in that bunch. So they invited me to be a part of that. And so the deeper I got involved in it, I said, who's handling the money? And you know, it broke down right then. It broke down. So the evangelistic tour fell. And so John thought about being a great basketball player. And his daddy was a great coach there too. And Brother Schultz was on a lot of those good teams down there. And Huntland had really good basketball, and Shirley brought them to the top. And one year, their team became the #1 seed in the 24th district. Now, you folks in Fayetteville are not going to want to hear about the 24th district, because it took us a long time to wrestle the 24th district tournament away from Lincoln County and Fayetteville and get it up in heaven. You know, Winchester, it's up to Winchester and down to Fayetteville. Y'all get that vernacular, not just geography, but the tournament came to Winchester. We had a brand new, Olympic gymnasium, and Huntland comes in the #1 seed, and John Majors and his team trot out, and they play the #1 seed always gets to play the last seed, and that was Tullahoma, and some club footers over there. Sosby was one of those, and but now John in this game didn't shoot at the wrong basket. Now he had a history of shooting at the wrong basket, and that's in that correct, Larry? And so, but believe it or not, Huntland rolls into Winchester to play in that brand-new gymnasium up there. And Huntland had these pretty fan-shaped backboards, and so we know we're going to have the right stuff, and so we get the new glass, square backboards, and Huntland, and I don't know what their shooting percentage was. Majors went 1 for 14, and the score was 22-21 Tullahoma. And so John decided he wouldn't be a basketball player. He'd have to stay with football. Well, his football career speaks for itself. We tried to want to get him to come to Vanderbilt, and Baby Ray recruited him and did a good job. Farmer Johnson won that battle. They're folks from around these areas. But we had pretty tough times. Hope you're too young to remember us in the 50s, but we won. The Vanderbilt team won 8 games in 52, 3, and 4. And then our Gator Bowl team, we won 8. And we had a pretty good team, but we really got started the year before in late November when the Big Orange rolled into town, and we kicked them 26-0. And that was one of the great victories of all time. And Coach Easy Bob Cummings did a great job of putting together a defense for us that day. He called it the kitchen sink defense. And the kitchen sink was the weak side off tackle and running pass play from Tennessee. And so Easy Bob had us keying the guards, and Larry Hayes. Larry did pretty well when he could play for money. And so turnovers always help, and so he was given $1 for every turnover that he got. But they rolled into town. Darius McCord from Franklin. I mean, some boys that we'd all played against, and that's one of the big things about the game. We've all played one another in grade school, high school, and then in college. And Majors, frankly, didn't get to start the game. And a boy named Jamie Wade did, and we pounded upon him pretty hard. And by late first half, while John got to go in the game, and they started him in the second half, and he played a pretty good game. But now in those days, what you don't realize, 26-0 doesn't sound like very much now as far as scoring. But those were the old days when they threw out unlimited substitution. And we players had to play offense, defense, and special teams. And it put just a little more pressure on you. And, of course, we didn't carry around 270 and 80 pounds and 300 pounds. And they wouldn't today if they had to play 48, 50, 55 minutes. But that was really something. And so when we finally in the fourth quarter put that fourth touchdown up there, and Jalufka did his push-up, we had a guy that would kick extra points, and before he'd do them, he would do a push-up. And y'all remember Charlie Coffey from over at Shovel? Charlie was a guard. Charlie said, "Cunningham, what in the hell is he doing a push-up?" I said, "Charlie, we got to do something for exercise." And so that didn't sit too well. So late in the game, and it's just about over, why Johnny can't move them, and they got a punt on 4th down. And so about a minute before that, my foot gives way. I had a problem with what they call March fractures. I had a metatarsal that would give way, and it gave way, thank you, Lord, about 58.5 minutes into that game. And so with 4th down, and I don't know what the distance was, but Tennessee was back on about the 15-yard line. And y'all know that there are such things as a single threat, dual threat, and triple threat. And, well, Tennessee had a triple threat boy. and he was something else, and named John Drum. And John Drum, you listen, how many quick kicks have you all ever seen? He could send that thing like a dart. He'd get up about 15 yards and he'd pooch it down there like a rocket. 70-yard gain. You know, the next year he had one of his greatest plays of the century. He sent 170 yards against Georgia Tech at Grant Field. And so here he is, 4th down, and what's John going to do? Snap to him, and this play is happening now at about on the north end of the field, kicking south. And I don't know why John did what he did, because he could. When he gets up in a minute, you need to see his hands and his feet. He's got big hands and big feet, not just a big mouth, but he can absolutely throw the ball and kick the ball. But when he kicked that ball, he kicked it up and it just kept going up. And we got a safety man just dying to get that ball. Everybody wanted to play against Tennessee that day. That was fun. And that ball was hanging up there about 15 yards short, and our safety man, Danny Byers, bless his heart, and need to say a prayer for him now, too, for this lick. So how many of you all would have caught that ball? Tennessee gets beat 26-0, and they're all angry. And Danny's going to come to catch that ball. Would you hope? At least signal for a fair catch? Well, Tennessee knew that he'd be signaling for a fair catch. So they decided we'll get it and we'll clean up before. And that ball goes one way and Danny goes the other. And John had pooched it down there. I don't know whether it's on purpose or not. But then, at that particular time, it happened like it always happened, a free fall. And 2 of my teammates are here, Bobby and Rooster. Do you all remember that? Were y'all in the stands then? That was the damnedest fight I've ever seen in all my life. We'd had more fun beating them that day, 26-0. But really, Coach, you'd have gone out there and saved your star. But there was bloodletting out there in the fight. And the kids, believe it or not, they took their helmets off. And they went at it like crazy. And John caused every bit of that. And I don't know why I took pity on him, but I got to thinking, and my mother and his mother, wonderful people and good friends, and he's standing down there watching the fight, about 20 yards from it. So I go out there and stand by him with my shoe in one hand, and I could have had a broken bone in my foot, and he's just sitting there with his head down. He said, "Y'all got us today, but we're going to get you. We'll get you back. We'll get you back." But I really felt like I needed to go out there and stand with him to keep him from getting cleaned up on like the rest of them. Folks, it's been good to be here. I hadn't gotten to talk to you all. I'm not going to talk long about Fayetteville and Bryson College. Both my parents attended. My father graduated at Bryson. And so we hadn't talked about Cumberland Presbyterian and Associate Reformed Presbyterian, but this town is warm to my heart, and even Charlie Lindsay, some of those old folks. But John Majors did deserve to be Heisman winner. He was the absolute best football player in college in 1956. And like Peyton, and like us, all of us, why, we're still suffering from the media's reconstruction. They're still getting it to us. And you all know how we suffered down here for 150 years after the Civil War, and it's still going on. And thank God we got to a playoff. And so all of us, we're first of all for our schools, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Alabama, and we sure enough are on the national championship game. Love y'all. Thank you.
I'm proud to claim the next roaster as a colleague of mine for a number of years, a long time. We worked together. Joe Biddle is a native of Johnson City and a graduate of East Tennessee State University. He worked in Daytona, and then he came to the Banner in about 1979 or 80 and stayed there until the Banner folded in 1998. And when he left 1 week at the Banner when it folded, and the next week he joined the Tennessean and was a columnist there for a long time. Won't tell any more about him, but I think all of us know who he is. Joe, you're next. Thank you.
Thought Larry was going to tell you I grew up with Steve Spurrier, and that would just send a lot of booze this way. I want to go back in time a little bit. I used to do sports talk radio when it was real sports talk radio. With George Plaster for a long time, 99.7, that's the only signal that we were ever on that you could hear this far away. And they didn't have cell phones back then, so we didn't get many phone calls, you know. You couldn't get on your car phone and call in. So we had to put little skits together, things like that. So Plaster and I dreamed up this one where he would be calling Coach Majors to get an interview with him. And Coach Majors certainly wasn't aware of that because moi pretended to be Coach Majors. So I'm going to take you back to one of those fake interviews, and since Plaster's not here, I'll have to play both roles, I guess. Coach, I know you're up at Pittsburgh. You're doing well up there. I love that stadium. I've been to it before, but tell me, what are those three rivers that represent Three Rivers Stadium there? Huh? Yep, love history, love geography. I can tell you what they were. First you got the Allegheny. Let me see the Mongalolola. And let's see, the third one, let me see here, let me see. Give me some time, dadgummit. I got it, hold on. The Caney Fork. That's what it is, Caney Fork River. That's the Three Rivers. Well, thank you, Coach. I appreciate that geography lesson. Now, let's go on. I know Coach Nealon had a bunch of axioms that he used when he was coaching, and I know you've developed some of your own through your own career. Tell us about one of those. Well, you know, I was secondary coach for Coach Broyles, Arkansas. Our guys couldn't tackle. They couldn't tackle a dummy. So I'd get them out there, and I'd demonstrate. I'd get in their face. I'd say, here's how you do it. I'd hit one of them in the chest. I said, you got to hit them right in that chest. Reach in there and grab a pulley bone. And, well, Coach, that's good. I didn't know you could, I didn't know humans had pulley bones, but that's all right. We'll go with that. And then the next one was, this is a true story. No, I'm serious. Tennessee had problems getting some, well, they weren't student athletes. Back then they were athletes posing as students. And NCAA ruined all that. And so he came to Tennessee and he had some trouble getting some guys in. So he brought this one young man in and he said, closed the door to his office and he says, huh? I'm going to give you an oral exam, see if you can't be admitted to Tennessee. Got 2 questions. He said, okay, Coach. He says, how old are you? Guy looked at him, he says, "18, Coach. That's right. That's right. Got it right. That's good. Only got one more. One more. Dadgummit, what was that question? I got it. Hold on. What's your first name? Guy goes, Lavoisier. He said, okay, I understand you counting on your fingers. You got 18. How'd you get what's all this stuff to get your name? He says, Coach, simple. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lavoisier. Happy birthday to you, Lavoisier. You know who I'm talking about, too, don't you? But in all seriousness, I want to tell you a story that I'll never forget. John Majors extending his courtesy to me professionally. In those days, I was working with the Banner, afternoon newspaper, covered Saturday game at Tennessee, and Tennessean had a huge advantage. Tennessean got out twice with the Tennessee game before the Banner ever came out the first time on Monday afternoon. You get the picture. We got the scraps. That's all we got because Tennessean had cleaned out every quote that you could get. So Johnny and I talked about that one time. He says, tell you what I'll do. When I get through the press conference, you come down to Coach's locker room, everybody be gone. I'm going to take a shower and get dressed. You can ask me questions, any questions you want. I said, Coach, you going to do that? He said, yeah. So I go down there, and we'd do that. It worked great. He'd give me some fresh stuff. I'd ask some questions that hadn't been asked in the press conference. So he's in there one day, and the bench was right outside of the shower there, so it was an open shower, and he's in there showering. And I look in there, and not that I was trying to stare at him or anything, but he was covered from head to toe with soap and shampoo. I mean, he looked like the abominable snowman in there. And so I asked him a question, and I said, Coach, you on that 3rd down and 3, you ran this, and I think you should have. Do you think you should have quick kicked then? He comes flying out of that shower, and he's throwing that soap all over. It's going everywhere. And he said, you take him right. You take him right. I told Coach Avizano we should have quick kicked there, and I don't know why he didn't do it. And I said, calm down, Coach, calm down. I said, go back in there, get back in that shower and wash yourself off. But he did that for me, and I'm going to tell you that, and I've been in this business a long time. There's not one coach then or now that would allow the media that kind of access that he let me have. And like I say, I'll forever be grateful for him. He's a great guy. He's a great coach. And we're lucky to have him in Tennessee. He's a true Tennessean. And I wish him best of luck as he goes on. But still want to know where he found that pulley bone.
Our final roaster today is someone who I think most of us are familiar with. It's Hope Hines, who was sportscaster and sports anchor on Channel 5 in Nashville. He began there in 1971. He spent about 40 years in the broadcast business. He left Channel 5 at one point in time, and he wound up being a play-by-play man for numerous NFL teams. He's a University of Georgia graduate and has received just a slew of awards during his time here and covered UT and Knoxville. At times, I guess the one thing I'll say about Hope is that he probably had as many relations as any on the Middle Tennessee and regional landscape as anyone who's been in our midst in several years, and more than anybody in broadcasting. So, Hope.
John, are we having fun yet? It ain't over, brother. And I'm the last one. I got the last word. Well, I guess you're going to have the last word. Tell you what kind of relationship I have. He walks in, sticks out his hand, and he says, what the hell are you doing here? I didn't invite you. I don't know where that's going, but in any event, we've had a great relationship over the years. By the way, how many of you shook hands with John? A lot of you hadn't had a chance to do that, and that's damn good. Because when he was a player and you shook hands with him, he was looking for a $100 bill. And he's still looking for a $100 bill today if you shake hands with him, so be careful. Oh, me. Speaking of John when he was a player, how many remember the 57 Sugar Bowl? John, you remember the 57 Sugar Bowl? Well, wait a minute. Let me tell it for you. 1957, this triple threat UT tailback was playing for the University of Tennessee, and they were playing against the Baylor Bears. This was in the Sugar Bowl. Tennessee was winning 7-6 in the fourth quarter. Now, John, ever since that day, let me just interrupt and tell you, has been carrying a heavy, heavy burden. A heavy burden since that day. Okay, they're leading 7-6. They punt to John Majors, who's standing back in close to about the 10-yard line. He fumbles the punt. They recover. They score. And Baylor wins the Sugar Bowl by a score of 13-7. Now, because of that, because of what happened that day, John Majors, to this day, will not allow anyone to take his picture holding a baby. He's too afraid he'll drop it. The first time I met Coach Majors, I was in San Diego. This is 1976. Now, the Pittsburgh team hadn't won the national championship last year, but he was out there for the Tea Council, right, Coach? You remember that? Absolutely. I think Vince Dooley had lassoed him and gotten him into that, and they would go across the country with somebody told me, I think it was Coach Dooley that said about John Major, said he's the only guy I know that can exhaust an unlimited expense account. I don't know if that's true or not. But now look at the way he's dressed today. Dapper, nice tie, clean-looking outfit, wouldn't you say? Well, when I saw him that day, he had the god-awfulest looking sport coat on I have ever seen in my life. I thought, you would have thought it was a Men's Warehouse reject, or at least the third suit in a Joseph A. Banks giveaway. It was awful. But he always considered himself a classy dresser, and indeed he is. Well, the next time I saw John, that was in 1976, and I was in San Diego during the Charger ball games, working for KFMB television. 1983, I come back to Tennessee, and I go up on a Tuesday to one of his press conferences. John's there, and Bob Kessling there, and, Bob Bell, I think, Paul Eels, all the other guys that were sportscasters in Nashville and Knoxville. We were sitting there asking questions, and I asked a question, and Coach May just kind of took those glasses off and looked over at me like this and kind of stared. I thought, oh, hell, I guess I have really screwed up here. And he didn't say anything, asked a question. Now, when the press conference is over, he comes over to me and he says, who the hell are you? And I told him, I said, Coach Majors, we met when you came out to San Diego. Oh, that's right. I knew I met you somewhere. He says, why don't we go have lunch? So he invited me to go have lunch with him at the training table, and we struck up a friendship that's been going on for these many years since then. But he did, in fact, embarrass me a number of years later. He came to Nashville. I think, Coach, you came to speak to the Boy Scouts. It was their annual fundraiser, and maybe 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 people there, huge crowd. And when it's over, the press had the availability to come talk with Coach. We're all assembled around there. It's like a gangbang, as we called it. Majors looked at me and he said, Hines, what dumbass question you going to ask me today? You said that, Coach. You just embarrassed me to death. But I've always admired John as a disciplinarian. Now, to be in coaching, you've got to be a disciplinarian. And he was one of the best. Now, there are some coaches that we know that let things slide. Coach Majors would never let anything slide. He had a couple of offensive linemen one year named John Fisher and Mike Stoll. They were offensive linemen, played for Coach Majors, good players. Well, they were down on the strip one night, and it was, after midnight, and they tossed a few back, for a couple of hours, and they were feeling no pain. And Fisher says, Stoll, he says, you know what? He said, I'm so bad. He said, I can throw a manhole cover like a Frisbee. And Stoll says, oh, really? I said, well, you got to prove that. So they amble on up to Black Track, and they're up there stumbling around after midnight. It's probably 1 o'clock in the morning. They're both a little inebriated, let's put it that way. And Fisher's got that crowbar, and he found him a manhole, and he pulled that thing off, and he's lifting that sucker up, and he's trying to get ready to throw it like a Frisbee, and all of a sudden, here come the lights. It's the cops. They come up, and they find him, put him in the car, take him back downtown. Now, the next day, Coach Majors hears about this, of course. They had just built a new meeting room
there at the University of Tennessee. So Coach has called Fisher and Stowell in there, and he is giving them down the country. He's giving them his best coach speak. Boys, you're leaders on this team. You have embarrassed me, you've embarrassed your family, you've embarrassed the university. Now, here's what we're going to do. Because of that, I've got to set an example. You will run every morning at 6 o'clock. I'll have a coach out there for you, and your curfew will be 11 o'clock at night. Do we understand each other? Yes, sir, Coach. Yes, sir, we do. He's got that mean John Majors look on his face, and he says, okay, I want you guys to stand here for the next 10 minutes, think about what I had to say. He turns. This is a brand new meeting room now. He turns, opens the door, walks in and closes it. Little did he realize that was the cleaning room. He had walked into the cleaning room. They're standing there looking at each other like, should we go open the door? Should we help him out? 30 seconds later, that door opens, and you can just see it now, can't you? He opens the door and kind of sticks his head around. Two players are still, he's got that old grin like he's got on his face right now. He stepped out there and he said, all right, boys, this is the way this is going to go down. Nobody will ever hear about what happened here today. I better not ever hear about what happened. And oh, by the way, you don't have to run and the curfew's rescinded. Disciplinary. Coach Majors. Coach Majors had a lot of quirks, too. Now, I mean, he really did. You can just know his personality. All you people know he had a lot of quirks. One of them was, for his assistant coaches, you do not toot, toot on your whistle. Is that right, Coach? Toot, toot. Yeah. In other words, if you're going to blow the damn thing, blow it. So Frank Emanuel, true story, Coach, Frank Emanuel was standing to practice one day, and he was at one end of the field going, toot, toot. Major turned around and said, Frank, if you're going to blow the damn thing, blow it. If you don't, put it in your pocket. He turned around and walked off. Well, that thing made Emanuel so mad, he turned around and tossed that whistle up in the stands. Well, Major's heard about it. After practice, Emanuel's in his office. Major sticks his head in and says, Frank, I just got a call from Ripley's, believe it or not. They're going to put you in the record book for the longest toss for a coaching whistle. And he says, you know what else? If you ever do it again, I'm going to be in the record book for shoving it the farthest anybody's ever put it up somebody's rear end. He had a lot of quirks, there's no question about it. Now, somehow he's gotten into this Butch Jones thing. He really loves this guy and thinks he's going to do a great job, which we all think he probably is. So last week, before the South Carolina game, he goes to a lot of coaches' meetings. What he forgets is when the parking lot is full, he just parks his car anywhere he wants to, just like he did here today. You'll see it right outside. He knows I'm telling the truth. He goes in, comes back out. Now it's 5 o'clock. Lake Loudon Boulevard is just teeming with traffic. He walks out, the horns are blowing, they're screaming and yelling. He thinks it's all in adulation for him. Somebody gives him the finger and he thought, boy, this is just like what it used to be. And so thought he was coaching again. Now comes Saturday. He's on the sideline, just like somebody talked about a little while ago. He's standing there. He's into the game. He's walking up and down the sidelines. And all of a sudden, Tennessee wins. The game's over. And I won't say that he's lost touch with reality, but some guy ran up to him and said, hey, Coach, what about that game? Best damn game I coached in a long time. One final story. I'll have to give Doug Matthews credit for this, Coach, one of your favorite coaches. Doug Matthews, of course, was coaching the offensive side of the ball in the mid-'80s, 86, sometime like that. And usually Tennessee played Vanderbilt the Thanksgiving week on a Saturday. And then the Clinic Bowl had their clinic on Tuesday. They had asked Coach Majors to come speak. He says to Matthews, who, of course, recruited Middle Tennessee, he says, man, I don't know if I need to accept that invitation, Doug. What if we get beat? I got to go up there and stand in front of all those folks and talk. And Matthews said, well, you know, Coach, that's a pretty big banquet. There'll be a lot of folks there. You can make a lot of points. He said, all right. Damn it, I guess I will. So anyway, the game rolls around. It's the first half. They're in Knoxville. Vanderbilt is leading 28-3. That's right, Coach. Matthews is standing down here. Majors sticks his hand in his pocket, walks down, stands right next to Matthews. Now they're losing, you know. I mean, the pressure's on the line. Everything in the world that can go wrong is going wrong. Majors leans over and he says, Matthews, ain't gonna speak next Tuesday in Vanderbilt. You gonna do it. But they came back and won. He knew how to cut his losses. Let me say this about Coach. He always accused me of making him say things that he didn't necessarily want to say. Is that right, Coach? That's exactly right. And don't forget it. But we had a great relationship, and like Joe Biddle, he would allow me to ask questions and do things that he just didn't do with other people. And I think that's because we had that relationship that we could trust each other, and he knew that I wasn't going to make him look bad. But here's the thing about John. He is the absolute best when things are the absolute worst. You recall 1988, UT went 0-6. They go to Memphis State to play. Now they're calling for his head. The players are not happy. The fans are not happy. The school officials are not happy. They beat Memphis State that day and win 5 straight after that to finish the year 5-6. Well, in 1988, John Majors and the University of Tennessee go 11-1. They win the SEC championship. They beat Arkansas in the Cotton Bowl. In '89, they go 9-2-2, win the SEC championship, and they beat Virginia in the Sugar Bowl. And in '91, they go 9-3. Now here's what's happened: when things are the worst, he can get the best out of his team. After beating Memphis State, they went 0-6, beat Memphis State. They won 16 of the next 17 games. I don't care who you are or where you coach. That's one hell of a job. No question about it. Coach, it's been my pleasure knowing you all these years. I love you like everybody else in this room does. And now it is your turn to come up here and say whatever the heck it is that you think you need to say.
Well, I've heard many people who've been roasted or toasted or whatever and get up and try to match everything better than what the other people had already said about them. Well, don't plan to do that because I'm not that competent to do all that, because it's hard enough to try to explain exaggerations. But extreme exaggerations is impossible. So one thing I'm convinced of after today, whoever referred to something about a legend, John Majors, of course my Lynchburg and Huntland friends know that I'll never be a legend, and I haven't forgotten where I came from. But I can assure you that I will be a legend no more if the people who spoke today will have anything to do with it. Because Joe Biddle writes about it, and Hope Hines talks about it. Yeah, they were pretty good about getting me to say things that I might not have said to other people. And I have a lot of Vanderbilt friends, as I refer to them. I grew up respecting Vanderbilt and loved to, and I listened to them every Saturday, along with Tennessee and Alabama and Army. I'm not going to go into all that. Those are my favorite teams growing up. Army was my favorite in World War II. But they do exaggerate quite often. I noticed that Cunningham, who's a good talker, talked about the 1954 game, which I remember explicitly, because I played the whole second half. I'd been hurt the week before, and I wasn't a starter. I started the Alabama game that year. And I've told many people I had a lot to do with the success of that Alabama game. My first start when Jimmy Wade was hurt, who I was an understudy, like I had a lot to do with the success of the 1949 Lynchburg, Moore County and Lynchburg Tigers, the Blue Raiders. And I'm standing here today with two of my senior teammates. I was a freshman in 1940, Dudley Tips, and I see Price Horton. I haven't seen him in 20 years. We were on the infamous Lynchburg team, and my dad used to take us to Vanderbilt once a year. Once I was 12 years old, and Joe was 10, and Bill was 8. We went every year from 1948 to see Vanderbilt play a game at home, because Tennessee was a long way away. And we went till I went to college. And
but he took us around to see Fayetteville, Winchester, Manchester, Tullahoma, and Fayetteville, the big towns play. And Lynchburg never played any of those towns. And I knew that. They played Tullahoma when my dad was in high school, and they called my dad Shirley Majors. Was like a ghost tonight. We had a hard time tackling him. My dad was a great athlete, one of the best that ever came out of this part of the country. But Lynchburg, I started as a quarterback and played some halfback. We played open up at Manchester, and I could throw spirals and kick spirals since I was a little bitty guy, 5 and 6 years old. I could always punt spirals. My dad showed me how to do it. I never had to learn a thing about punting at passing at Tennessee except to speed up my punting because college players rush faster. He showed me how. George Cavigo and Harvey Robinson, great punting coaches, but they didn't have to change the way I held it and the way I stepped. So we had Manchester the first week on our schedule up at Manchester. Well, I knew that was a bigger school than we were, but I couldn't wait to play high school football. So I'll go over there, and before the game, Daddy was going back and forth to Huntland that year from Lynchburg. He had 6 kids. Bob had just been born, 6 months old. I'm 14, and I'm a freshman with Dorothy Holt, that beautiful girl married Rudy Elam back here. I've been jealous of Rudy ever since. But Dorothy and I started the first grade together. And Dorothy, aren't you sorry you didn't kiss me on that hay ride? But Dorothy and I have known her ever since I was born. Her mother was a beautiful woman, and her dad ran the local appliance store in Marion Holt. And her mother and my mother were great friends. They played bridge together, and a great family. And Dorothy and I were in the same class. Marilyn and Joe were in the same class, her sister, and Margaret Ann and Bill were in the same class. We're all 2 years apart. And we went on a freshman hayride. I was 14 in Lynchburg. Hayride, and I'm with Dorothy. I don't think we ever had dates, but I'm sitting there and I tried to kiss her, and she wouldn't let me kiss her. She's a tiger. She's just a beautiful woman and smart. Dorothy's a great person. And she came to UT as a freshman, so did I, and I'd walk her down to the movie. I didn't have a car and didn't have any spending money. I didn't get paid to go to UT, I'll tell you that. And you talk about those expense accounts, you dad blame right, I was liberal. I worked for some very tight people at UT. Yeah. And after my most winning years, 3 in a row, as Hope mentioned, a year later I was gone. So I knew in advance I'd probably be able to take advantage of those expense accounts. But I wasn't getting paid like Bill Curry was at Kentucky. Now back to this. We woke up, and before the game, I couldn't kick spirals, I couldn't throw spirals. And my dad was standing outside the end zone. He wouldn't have dared come on the football field. Another coach was coaching us. But I walked over and I was in tears. I said, Daddy, I can't make the ball spiral, kicking or punting or passing. He said, well, John, you're nervous. That's typical. But said, it'll probably work out when the game starts. You'll be throwing spirals. And I said, like the Alabama game I first started at Tennessee in Neyland Stadium, that Shields Watkins in. I did throw spirals. I threw 3 to Manchester, and they beat us 58-0. Alabama beat us 27-0. And then also, we played Fayetteville B team, and they beat us 13-7. Their B team. We played Pulaski. They beat us 65-7. We played Tullahoma the second game over at Tullahoma. They beat us 75-6. I'll never forget those games as long as I live. But I know that fumble punt. You know, I've always said I thought that I fumbled. I didn't fumble a punt. I don't think I ever fumbled a punt in my life. I want to straighten that story out right now. I didn't look at the Sugar Bowl till I came back to UT to Knoxville after I left Pittsburgh to come back and move for total, I think, 6 years ago. So Buddy Cruz and I looked at the Sugar Bowl. I never had any desire to look at it. We lost 13-7. But I caught the punt. I did catch it on the 8-yard line, which I probably never caught one inside the 10 in my whole life. In college, we were told don't catch the ball inside the 10. I caught the ball, went upfield about 5 yards, and I moved my arm, kind of started sidestepping. The ball fell out. I didn't fumble a punt. But one thing about my mother, and after the game, F.M. Williams, longtime writer, covered Tennessee, said, Mrs. Minch, my mother always wore a fancy hat, high-heeled shoes because she was 4 feet 10.5 inches tall. And all of us, when I was the oldest, we all measured with mother to see how much we were growing. Well, we got to mother's hips. We thought we were getting tall. They asked mother, Mrs. Majors, my mother and daddy could handle adversity. They didn't panic. They never said, we don't have the money. You boys don't need that now. When we don't have the money, you don't need that right now. I said, Mrs. Majors, he had a nice soft Georgia accent. Do you have anything to say about John's fumble? She said, well, no, FM. Even I burn the biscuits on occasion. I can guarantee you one thing. If somebody's writing about me today, it'll be more about fiction than it will be facts. These people have already spoken. Don't worry about it, and it won't be the first time when I disagreed with them. I thought they were writing fiction or talking fiction on TV either. So that's enough of that. But driving down here today, I always love coming back to Middle Tennessee. Tennessee is a beautiful state. Love coming back to Middle Tennessee, particularly Nashville. That's the big town where we used to go to. And I love to drive the old highways, but what about these 4-lane highways all over this area? But I'm very upset, and I don't think it'll help me. I don't vote for any right-wingers. I'm a progressive moderate. You probably don't care about that at all, but when I grew up, we had a very lovely, nice, moderate people around this area, and a lot of great people still live here. But I think I'm going to contact Bill Haslam. I don't think it might help, but I like Bill, and I think he's a good man. I think he's a good governor. They bypassed Huntland again when they 4-laned that lane road. We're still a mile off of 64, for God's sake. That's the most famous town in this whole area. But coming through, and I came by Boone's Hill. I couldn't see Boone's Hill. I guess it's up in the hills up there. But I know we played Boone's Hill in basketball and Blanche. Lincoln Junior High when I was a freshman, and played Chapel Hill and football and Linville and Petersburg and all that stuff. And Joe Majors and I was a senior and Joe was a sophomore. We were playing over at Boone's Hill and had a little gymnasium. And the ceiling wasn't much higher than this. That's a little exaggeration. But Sloan Joe was a school teacher in Lincoln County, I believe, tall, slender guy. And he was real tall. And he'd go down the court. Jimmy played under him, and probably Bobby did too. He'd run down the court and he'd skip. I think he was an agriculture teacher, and he officiated basketball, and a fine man. So I came down, and he was bad about calling shuffling your feet. You know, he's very too technical on that. We didn't shuffle it near as much as he thought we did. So I came down, and Joe and I were the two guards. We were bringing the ball down. I'm dribbling it downfield, and he called me shuffling the feet, so I just slammed the ball down. And my dad was a disciplinarian. He was our basketball coach, too, and baseball. He'd get on you strongly. Donald knows that. Donald, by the way, next time you see those girls are peeping through the holes, tell them next time, check my hands and feet. You heard what Cunningham said about my hands and feet. Tell them check something else next time. Bobby Kelso, he's a pretty cocky guy. Bobby Kelso, Bob Simmons. His dad coached the team up at Kelso, softball and basketball. My dad coached the little guys. We went in 7th and 8th grade over at Lynchburg. Bobby's a year or two behind me. He claims 2 or 3, but I think he's 1 at least, maybe 2. But coming through Boone's Hill, and then it won 3 plays later, or 3 minutes later, Joe comes down. He's dribbling. And Sloan Joe calls, shuffling your feet, shuffling your feet. Hell yeah, I believe when you blow the whistle, you ought to blow the whistle. You don't just do it with meaning. That's what Coach Jones does, and that's what I did. So Joe slammed the ball down. It bounced higher, man. They called it technical. Next morning, I forget who won. Mr. Homer Law was the principal standing, and Daddy never said a word to either one of us because I think he agreed with us rather than Sloan Joe. We walked in the front door, and Mr. Homer Laws was waiting at the door. He said, John, come in here. He said, John, I was embarrassed about what you did last night, more so than Joe. He said, when Joe saw you do it, he did just like your big brother. Don't ever do that again, even though Sloan Joe might not have been right. So I didn't do that anymore after that. Fayetteville had 2 good high school players when I was a kid. Bluebird Albright and Bully Sullivan, tailback and fullback. Now that's 2 good names. There's Bully's niece right back there. And also Tullahoma at the same time had a tailback named Red Arnold and a fullback named Blue House. How about that? Blue House and Red Arnold. Those are great names. Bluebird Albright, Bully Sullivan. Bully Sullivan became a very good coach at Petersburg. I played against him. He played for Bill Wise. Bill Wise played for him. And he went on to Lynchburg and was successful, like Billy Joe Evans was successful at Lynchburg. And Steve Edgen over there, I recruited at Mississippi State. He coached here for many years. He's from Hilltop, Greenbriers, where he went to high school, and Blue House coached him. So coming through here brings a lot of great memories back. Playing at Chapel Hill for our first Duck River Valley Championship. We had to beat Chapel Hill. They were undefeated. The last game of the season, we were undefeated. Beat them. We went to the 2-yard line on the first play on a quarterback sneak. It would have actually been a single wing blocking back sneak. W.A. McCreeless went about 55 yards to 2. We beat them 34-14. We won 2 of the 3. And after I got there, after they got rid of me, they sent me to Tennessee. Huntland and my dad, Larry and Joe and Bill, and their teammates won 40 and lost none after they got rid of me. So we got them started, but they did a lot better. Well, Elkton, we played at Elkton. My first game was at Ardmore, Alabama. Never forget, as long as I live, it's pouring down rain, going to Ardmore, pouring down rain. We beat them 19-7. We beat Elkton. Elkton doesn't have a football team anymore. Neither does Linville, and neither does Petersburg. But it was a great experience growing up here, for crying out loud. And Jimmy said I was recruited by Vanderbilt. Bobby claims that I was not what they needed there. I've never said this before, but Vanderbilt, as intellectual as that school is, and Bobby is telling the truth about agriculture and culture. It was on the field track there on a piece of cardboard. Vanderbilt culture, Tennessee agriculture, and that was a little bit degrading, but we won the game. That helped. Cunningham didn't mention the 55 team game that we won, but this is the truth. You can believe all these other fables if you want to, but it's fiction what they've been talking about today. Vanderbilt kind of pulled off of me because when they realized that I not only came from Huntland, but also grew up in Lynchburg, they thought that my background was too intellectual to Vanderbilt. So that's what it is. Now, Butch Jones is an outstanding coach. He's going to do just fine there. He's got all it takes. He's straightforward. There's nothing phony about him. He's energetic, and he's a great recruiter. But he's not a hot rock salesman. He's going to sell you something and not be able to back it up. Tell you something else. There's another outstanding coach in this state right now, not too far away. That's a gentleman by the name of James Franklin. Butch Jones is a very good friend of mine. So is James Franklin. I've gotten to know him very well. We were on a trip with the Nike people last year. My wife and I were. James Franklin is smart. He's got character. He's fun. He's got a great sense of humor. His wife's a very smart, well-educated person. So we have 2 outstanding coaches. Naturally, I always respected Vanderbilt, and I still do respect Vanderbilt. Naturally, I want to see Tennessee win. I didn't care at all about Vanderbilt when I was playing against them because they hated us, and I hated them because they would hit you a little late sometimes, you know. As intellectual as they are, they're
we're going to talk about that. We'll win equal time.
And one other thing, okay, and now about through here, let's see if there's anything really important. I'm not going to say anything else except one thing about Cunningham and the big fight.
Save your skin one day.
SEC coach. Cunningham said I was down there about 20 yards from the fight. I punted the ball. When I punted the ball, Cunningham was. When I punted the ball, and before I could start running, we weren't taught to run real fast. The punters down till because we were kind of stay back, see if somebody broke it, try to tackle, save for the touchdown. So I didn't just sprint down there. I'm just kind of jogging, and I see the fight start immediately after they try to catch the punt, and he's already told that. And the helmets off and hitting each other on the benches and everything. I just stayed right where I was. Next thing I know, Cunningham's at my side. And we weren't too excited about getting into that fracas. The next day, the paper showed Cunningham and me talking back here 35 yards away. It wasn't 20 yards, and you see the players fighting in the distance down there. So We didn't get into it. We were friends, and we didn't think we ought to, try to hurt each other right then. So that's about it. But think about how good can people get today. Manziel's and the quarterback at Clemson and the quarterback, and it's Cam Newton. All I ever wanted when I was watching football recently, all he says, give me Tim Tebow. That's all I ever want, Lord. What's the first thing I said to you today when I saw you? Are you still praying for me? Donald Schultz always prays for me, he says. Now, Donald, don't you tell a lie. now listen, by the way, I got to say a word about Jim Walker. Jim, stand up right there, please. That's Colonel Jim Walker. Now, one thing I don't think, is Fuzz Harmon here? No. Okay, Fayetteville was tough to beat in basketball. Doug Schrader's the best high school basketball player I ever played against from Fayetteville. But they really should have been penalized with the NCAA for overemphasizing basketball. They didn't have football, so we had to have practice football too, so they overemphasized. They should have been penalized, but seriously, they were tough to beat, and he was the best one I ever played against. Jim came from down in Edie Bend, which is Moore County, his family did, and also he went to school at Fayetteville some, and he graduated from Lincoln County High School. Other way around. They ran me out of town when the school burned. The school burned. You probably had something to do. You probably had something to do with that. Jim Walker is one of the most unique people I've ever met. We've been pheasant hunting a lot together. We've been friends about 15 or 20 years through Bill Wise, who's now departed, unfortunately. He's had 3 tours in Vietnam, became a full colonel, had his own brigade. He either crashed or was shot down 13 times in a helicopter and survived. Now, not only that, he had an embolism, I believe it was in the abdomen, about 3 years ago, in a coma for 6 weeks at least. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I don't know, but it was like that close to not being around here. So he's done that surviving, and now we were going pheasant hunting a year ago in October. He checked with his doctor, he wasn't feeling real well. He had a case now, he's hiding leukemia, and he's getting some good news. He was really in a tough spot there. I told him a long time ago, after he survived, he came back from near death and came back, and he's tougher than heck. I said, Jim, don't even sweat it. I said, the Lord ain't ready for you, man. He's one of the all-time characters I've ever known. And I tell you what, I've told his wife, if he does die before I do, I want to be there at the autopsy. I want to see when they cut his brain open, what produces what comes out of his mouth. That tells you what I know about Jim Walker. He was a great. Lewis Thompson, that's a great career. Good to see you, Lewis. I know you friends from Moore County and Huntland. That's where the cultural centers of the Mid-South, lower Middle Tennessee. Bill Hobbs back there, right, my next door neighbor, right across the street from the main street in Lynchburg. The library is where I was born, with my grandmother Bobo's house, and Bill Hobbs and his family lived right across the street, and 2 of his brothers played for my dad. Bill was in World War II. Spent 3 years over in the Philippines. My name is John Terrell Majors, Terrill. Skippy Park's mother and his brother Bobby, their mother was my piano teacher. Bill married a Majors, and there she is sitting next to him still. That's good. But Bill used to tease me when I go by his house to go to the grocery store, go downtown, and 1 block away to the square. He called me John Tail. John Tail. Hey, John Tail, how you today? Well, that just really embarrassed me, and I didn't like it. Till this day, he doesn't call me John Terrell. He calls me John Tail. Bill, thanks for making me grow up quick.
Thank you, Coach, and thank you, Bob, and Don, and Jim, Joe, Hope. Really appreciate your contribution to today's program. And I would like to thank also Joe Faison on behalf of our Rotary Club for his contribution to today's program. Hope brought some of his books, a box over here in hindsight. If any of you are interested, he was here, I guess, a year, 18 months ago, and I think his book had just been completed. So he has some books here. He'll be glad to autograph some for you if you want them. How much are they, Hope?
$50.
$20. He's just come down from 50 to 20. We also have a book for each one of our roasters and a basket of vegetables from Monk's Produce here in Fayetteville. Larry, I appreciate your help with today's program. All of you, Mike, and our guest, particularly our guest, certainly outnumber our Rotarians today. And Coach, I will say you know how to draw a crowd. Always have. Many is 100,000 at times.
One thing, I should keep my mouth shut. I've got somebody that's very special to me. Is here today too. A lot of them are. A lot of them were mentioned. But this week, Saturday, Sewanee plays a homecoming game at Sewanee. Our brother Larry is the fourth boy. We first four played for Daddy. Larry played on the last undefeated team in Sewanee's 20th century. They had two in the 20th century, 1958, our father's second year. And the next one was 1963. They were both 9-0, right, Larry? Yeah. 9-0. And Larry was a wing-back, tailback, and safety man on those. So they're having a big reunion, the 50th of the 63 team and the 55th of the 58 team. So Mary Lynn and I plan to be there. If you don't have anything else to do, go up on the mountain. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, sir. Larry, appreciate
Open
you.
house, yeah, our house will be wide open, open house.
Paul, Lucy, I would say there'll be some photo opportunities for the Elk Valley Times before everyone gets away. At this time, I'm going to call on Paul Richardson to come forward with a toast to Coach Majors, and if you all will, we'll all stand. If I've overlooked anyone to say thank you, I apologize, but we do appreciate the program and the contributors.
All right, if you would all join me, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back, the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of his hand. Coach Major.
All of you can tell by my polished comments that for sure Joe exaggerated on mocking me on his radio show.
Sign of flattery.
Good to see you.